The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields of Greenview Ranch. Dust motes danced in the fading light, and in the distance, the low rumble of engines began to stir the sleepy silence. Farmer Hank McAllister leaned against his weathered barn, a hard-handed man of 60, with deep-set blue eyes and a heart grounded in his land. He inhaled deeply, the familiar sense of earth and hay mingling in his lungs. He felt it before he saw it. Something was coming. It started as a distant roar, the cacophony of dozens of motorbikes tearing through the stillness. Hank raised his brow, squinting into the horizon. A knot formed in his stomach. He knew those bikes knew their riders. They were part of a notorious crew that had taken to disrupting the peace across the county. Livestock shacked up in barns, farmers shaking their heads in fear. No one was safe from their chaos. But this time, they were heading straight for his home. As the sound grew louder, Hank pushed himself off the barn and straightened his back. In that moment, he felt that familiar fire igniting in his chest. The ranch was more than just his home. It was his legacy, nurtured and fought for through decades. He wouldn't let anyone take that away without a fight. Within moments, the motor crew roared into view. Waves of leather and chrome glinted in the golden light, engines purring like predatory beasts. Hank could see them now, reckless grins plastered across their faces, wild men itching for trouble. They seemed like a storm brewing in the sky, powerful, chaotic, and determined to wreak havoc. Hank's heart raced. He straightened the brim of his old brown hat. "They won't take my land," he muttered under his breath as the crew of about 10 bikers came to a screeching halt just beyond his well-worn fences. Dust clouded the air as they dismounted, swaggering proudly, as if they owned all the land that lay before them. "Hey there, farmer," one of them shouted, his voice booming with mockery. They laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. Hank's fingers curled tightly around the fence rail. He stepped forward, keeping his eyes locked on the leader, who bore a leather jacket with patchy insignias. He asked, his voice steady but low, like the calm before a storm. The leader grinned, a twisted smirk that sent a chill down Hank's spine. "We're just here to have a little fun, old man. You don't need all this land." He gestured dismissively at the sprawling acres behind Hank, and that's when Hank felt it, the surge of anger boiling against the flames of fear. In his heart, he knew they wanted to strip him of his land, to scare him into submission, just like they had with so many before him. But Hank wasn't new to hardship. Hadn't the soil been rough-hewn by a million storms? Hadn't his father stood against the winds to protect what mattered? This ranch was his heritage, his heartbeat. "They've taken enough from others," Hank said, his voice rising above the chaos. The laughter hushed, replaced by a sudden tension that sliced through the air. The leader stepped closer, nostrils flaring like a bull ready to charge. "You think you can stop us? We can take anything we want." Hank took a deep breath, grounding himself in the moment. The ranch had weathered partnerships gone sour, crops failing, and harsh winters. He'd seen neighbors flee in the face of fear, but he wasn't ready to join them. "No," he declared, emotion flooding his voice. An uncomfortable silence clung heavily between the two men as the wind rustled through the tall grass. The crew was rooted in uncertainty, glancing between their leader and the stubborn farmer. Hank could see it in their eyes. They were thrill-seekers looking for an easy victory, expecting him to fold, to shake in fear, to run. But running wasn't an option. Not here, not today. The sun, now a blazing orange orb hanging low, illuminated Hank's weathered features, capturing the resolute determination etched across his face. There was no backing down. The tension crackled and sparked. Hank's heart thundered against his chest, his pulse quickening like the throttle of a revving motorcycle. He said, voice like steel. The leader scoffed. "You think you'll stand a chance? We're 10 strong." "I'm not just one man," Hank replied, his voice growing louder, ringing out against the threat, commanding every inch of his resolve. "I'm this land. Every rock in the soil, every root in the ground, every drop of sweat I've poured into this place. The people around here will stand with me." A flicker of uncertainty washed across the crew's faces, just for an instant, but it was enough. This wasn't just about bikes or bravado. This was about a man who had poured his soul into his home, and it resonated in the bones of the land itself. No one would take what mattered to him without a fight. Hank could almost hear the wavering hearts of his adversaries as he stepped forward, fueled by solidarity. In their cocky bravado, they could afford to lose. They didn't have decades of love and labor stitched into every inch of what they were challenging. "Get off my property," he commanded, voice like thunder, rippling through the air. Then, in a moment that felt like a scene frozen in time, everything shifted. The crew hesitated, flickers of doubt traversing their faces. Hank seized the moment, raising his chin defiantly into the dusk. The air thickened with tension, but in that stillness, something shifted, the slightest crack in their facade. "Do you know what it means to stand for something?" Hank implored, his voice full of emotion. "You think you're tough. Tough is tending to those fields, fighting through floods and planting what you'll never see bloom." His raw passion seemed to resonate, enhanced by the stillness of the encroaching night. For a moment, it looked like the bikers might relent. Hank could see doubt inching into their camaraderie, questioning their next moves. Some shifted their weight, gripping their throttles less tightly, and Hank felt the tide changing in his favor. Suddenly, a voice from behind Hank broke the silence. A young man, barely into his 20s, wearing a weathered cap and a face lined with worry. "Hank." The voice was shaky but laced with determination. It was his neighbor, Jason, rallying behind him, a testament that he wasn't alone anymore. Then came another, an older woman from down the road with her granddaughter close beside her. "We won't let them take you, Hank." The bravery of a community erupted like gold under a glaring sun, splintering the fear that had been so thick. Hank's heart swelled. One by one, neighbors joined him. The farmer's market operator, the teacher, even the kids that had once played in his barn. They stood shoulder to shoulder, forming a wall of unity between Hank and the storm of bikes. Together, they became a living testament of resilience. The leader's bravado faltered, his crew shifted uneasily. They had come expecting an easy target, but what they found was a family, a community refusing to back down. The laughter faded, replaced by the anxious whispers of uncertainty within their ranks. Hank seized the power of this unity, a deep pride swelling in his chest. He shouted, "This is what it means to fight. We don't need bikes, leather, or bravado. We have each other. We have this land." The leader shared a quick glance with his crew, but the grip of fear and doubt was too palpable now. The gathered crowd moved like a wave, rising and falling, merging to meet Hank's strength. Hank called after the crew, his voice booming into the distance. A final moment of hesitation lingered in the air. The leader's expression betrayed a mixture of uncertainty and rage, but knowing they were outnumbered, he cursed under his breath and waved his hand, motioning for his team to mount their bikes. One by one, the engines roared to life, but this time the sound was different, fleeing rather than charging into battle. In an eruption of dust and noise, they peeled away from Greenview Ranch, leaving the scent of gasoline behind them. The crew faded into the horizon, shadows swallowed by the darkening night. Hank stood there, chest heaving from the adrenaline, a mixture of fatigue and triumph washing over him. His neighbors erupted into cheers, a collective gratitude amidst the gathering dusk. Tears prickled at the corners of Hank's eyes as warm hands clasped his shoulders, a unity forged in the fires of resolve. Once more, nature enveloped them in the beauty of the evening. The sun bowed down, painting the sky with fiery hues, the earth surging with renewed life. The storm that had threatened Greenview Ranch had been pushed back. It wasn't just Hank standing his ground. It was a community united, fierce with love and loyalty. As night settled in, Hank knew they had won, not just for themselves, but for every farmer, every family that stood against the tide of chaos. They had shown there was strength in numbers, that love for the land could ignite passionate fire, and that together they would weather any storm that dared to come. In the heart of the flatlands, where fields stretched endlessly and golden waves of grain danced in the breeze, a storm was brewing. Not of rain or thunder, but of roaring engines and daring men. The sun hung low, casting a warm glow, but the air was taut with tension. Farmer Joe Whitaker felt it deep in his bones, an instinct accumulated over years of toiling under the sun, of battling against the storms of nature and fate. Joe stood on the porch of his rustic farmhouse, his hands calloused and rough from decades of work, relaxing against the old wooden rail. He squinted into the distance where the horizon blurred with heat. Slowly, a rumble began to rise, a sound neither familiar nor welcome. As the noise grew, a chill crept down his spine. His peaceful evening was about to be shattered. He turned to his daughter, Mia, who was busy tending to the chickens that wandered freely around the yard. "Get inside, sweet pea," he said, urgency wrapping around his words like barbed wire. Mia looked up, concern knitting her brows. Joe stared into the sunset, watching as the distant shapes sharpened into clarity. A gang of bikers on a dozen roaring motorcycles tore across the dirt roads toward the ranch, dust clouds billowing like storm clouds of their own. "Trouble," he replied grimly. The crew emerged like a pack of wolves, leather jackets glinting under the fading sun, laughter echoing against the vastness of the land. They veered off the main road and onto the dirt path towards Joe's property, kicking up dust and casting fears like shadows across the ranch. The sight ignited something primal in Joe. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a fire that had burned in him through countless trials. But this felt different. He shouted as he moved instinctively towards the old barn, a sanctuary against the coming chaos. The shadows of childhood memories flooded his mind, days spent fixing old tractors, the scent of hay mixed with the warmth of family. This land had been fought for, cherished, passed down through generations. He wouldn't let a band of reckless bikers torch that legacy without a fight. Mia rushed into the house, her heart thumping like a wild drum in her chest. Joe grabbed a rusted shovel leaning against the barn, an old friend that had served him well through countless seasons of hard labor. He held it tightly, feeling its weight settle into his grip as he stepped forward, ready to defend his home. The first biker, a broad-shouldered man with a scruffy beard and a roaring laugh, approached Joe with a swagger that danced on the edge of arrogance. He sneered, eyes gleaming with a wild thrill. "Just a lonely old farmer." Joe squared his shoulders, the sun setting behind him, casting a long shadow forward. "This is my land." The gang erupted into laughter, the sound reverberating across the stillness like a cruel joke. "Come on, old man. We're just here for some fun," the biker said, gesturing broadly as though to take in not just Joe but the entire ranch. Joe's heart pounded heavily in his chest, muscles tense and ready. "You don't want trouble here." The leader challenged, stepping closer, his scent of cigarette smoke mixed with leather wafting through the air. Behind him, his crew surveyed Joe, sizing him up, likely underestimating his resolve. Joe tightened his grip, the shovel now feeling like an extension of himself. They might think they could intimidate him, but this was more than just a piece of land. It was his home, a sanctuary built from sweat and tears. As the sun dipped lower, it cast a fiery glow against the looming threat. Joe began, eyeing the gang, searching for the flicker of doubt he hoped was hidden beneath their bravado. "I've lost so much in my life, lost family, lost friends. But this ranch, this is my legacy. I won't let you take what isn't yours." There was a moment, brief yet electric, where silence enveloped them like a blanket. Those present could almost hear the heartbeats thrumming in their chests. Joe's fierce expression had created a crack in their bravado. The leader exchanged glances with his crew, confusion mingling with uncertainty. Urged another biker, a tinge of mockery still clinging to his voice but hinting at hesitation. The crowd hadn't anticipated resistance. They had expected fear, submission, and perhaps even reverence towards their chaos. "How about we have some fun?" Joe saw this for what it was, a challenge, a dare to cross into a territory darker than any he had ever encountered. But what they didn't understand was that this wasn't just about bravado. This was about surviving generations of adversity. "Get off my property," Joe said, his voice resolute, rising above the tension and chaos. He felt the knot in his stomach tighten, but he pushed through it, standing firm among giants in leather. "You can delight in destruction elsewhere, but here." A flicker of intimidation crept into the leader's expression. Joe didn't back down. He stood as a noble oak against the storm, unwavering. His people had all trembled at one time or another, but he refused to show fear now. This was about protecting what mattered most. In that moment, something shifted. The anger and bravado of the crew began to crack under the weight of Joe's determination. He noticed a few of the bikers exchanged glances of doubt, their confidence giving way to uncertainty. Joe added, voice dropping a notch. "You could go home, be men instead of bullies." The leader frowned, those words landing like stones, cracking the facade around his bravado. Maybe they didn't have to throw themselves into chaos, a chaotic search for thrills at someone else's expense. But the hesitation was brief, and the old bravado pledged a comeback. "Guys, we don't need to listen to this loser," he scoffed, gesturing to his crew to rev their engines louder. The roar of the bikes grew deafening, but Joe persisted, sensing that even in their bravado, a part of them began to back down. "Take a moment," he urged with sincerity. "Think of what this means. You're not just a crew, you could be men who stand for something more than destruction." And as the last light of day surrendered to the enveloping darkness, something extraordinary happened. A tall figure appeared at the edge of the barn, silhouetted by the dim light. It was Mia, her eyes filled with fierce determination unseen in the innocence of her youth. She stepped forward, a picture of bravery, and stood beside her father, her presence weighing heavy against the wind. "Leave my dad alone," Mia shouted, voice trembling but testament to their bond. Behind her, other members of the community had begun to gather, drawn by the tension. Neighbors that Joe thought had watched from afar now stepped forward, united in solidarity, lending strength to his resolve. The bikers hesitated, confusion spreading like a ripple. They weren't just confronting Joe anymore. They faced everything he stood for, the hard work, love, and commitment of a community that thrived against adversity. "Back off. You think you can just roll in here and intimidate someone?" shouted Derek, the local farmer, stepping shoulder to shoulder with Joe, rallying behind him. Other voices chimed in, building an unyielding wall of support. "This isn't just Joe." The leader's bravado began to waver once more as he exchanged muted glances with his crew. The tide had turned, and Joe felt the shift. He could see the moment they realized they were outnumbered. This was no longer just a skirmish against a lone farmer, but a clash against an entire community willing to defend its heart. "Let's get out of here," the leader finally muttered, backing away, his voice held in the weight of disappointment and disbelief. One by one, the gang retreated to their bikes, engines now sounding reluctant and whimpering rather than fierce. Joe held his breath as the bikers turned and mounted their rides. Dust billowed up around them as they sped away, retreating into the darkness, leaving the ranch untouched. As the final echoes faded into the night, a silence fell over the crowd. The neighbors surrounded Joe, Mia at his side, an indomitable spirit shimmering between them. Relief and celebration washed over them, laughter blossoming where nerves once thrived. Nothing felt more profound than knowing what they had built against the odds. They had claimed not just a victory together, they had forged a bond, reminding each other of the strength lying in unity. In the cool night air, Joe smiled genuinely, wrapping his arm around Mia's shoulders. "You were so brave," he told her, pride swelling in his chest. "We were brave," she corrected, meeting his gaze, her eyes sparkling with the glow of the moment. And as they settled back around the porch of their farmhouse, laughter echoing like fireworks in soft starlit skies, Joe knew that while storms of trouble might rise and threaten their peace again, he had a community of strength to face whatever came their way. Together, always. The sky was painted with the colors of twilight, a tapestry of deep blues and oranges spilling across the horizon. On a sprawling ranch nestled between golden fields of wheat and a shimmering river, the faint sound of laughter and clanging metal echoed from a distant shed. Farmer Jake Donovan was knee-deep in his usual evening chores, examining the wooden fencing that had seen better days. Little did he know that serenity wouldn't linger much longer. Suddenly, a low rumble broke through the comforting sounds of nature, a sound that sent a shiver down his spine. He straightened up, squinting into the distance. In the fading light, a cloud of dust swelled, growing larger and darker as it approached, carrying with it the unmistakable roar of motorcycles and the chaos that often followed. Jake's heart raced. The laughter faded, replaced with a knot forming deep in his stomach. He knew this wasn't just a random disturbance. This was a crew known for leaving destruction in their wake. These weren't just thrill-seekers. They were trouble wrapped in leather jackets, a band of marauders who sought to impose their will wherever they roamed. The bikes emerged, 10 in total, their engines roaring like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. Jake gripped the fence post tightly, his knuckles turning white. A mix of fear and anger surged within him. This land wasn't just a stretch of dirt, it was his life, his family legacy. Generations had planted seeds, harvested crops, and built dreams here. He wouldn't let anyone take that from him without a fight. His daughter, Amy, called from the barn, her voice laced with concern. She was just 16, old enough to understand the danger but young enough still to feel the tremors of fear. Jake shouted, never taking his eyes off the winding road. He dashed toward the barn, the wooden slats creaking under his weight. The rumble of the bikes grew louder, transforming into a cacophony of growling engines and booming laughter. Jake turned back, positioning himself near the barn doors, shovel in hand, its rusty blade reflecting the last glow of sunlight. He felt a mix of determination and dread, a fierce protector ready to defend what was his. The first biker, a thick-set man with a beard as wild as a raging storm, stepped forward, swaggering like he owned the land. He jeered, examining the scene like a predator sizing up its prey. "Just a farmer," Jake replied, voice low but steady, fighting the tremor that threatened to escape. The man laughed, a sound that gripped the air with an unsettling chill. "Trespassing? I'd say we've come to party. Isn't that what life's all about?" Jake's gaze hardened. "This is my home." The crew of bikers chuckled, their camaraderie sharp as blades. They were looking for a thrill, a misplaced sense of power in intimidating a solitary farmer. But Jake wasn't just any farmer. He was a man who had faced hard times and emerged stronger. The land beneath his feet was embedded with stories of resilience, and he felt every one of them resonating within him. "Come on now," the leader taunted, stepping closer. "What do you think you can do?" Jake could feel the crowd of bikers expecting him to crumble, but a fire ignited within him, one that he had learned to control over the years. "I won't stand by while you destroy what I've built," he said, his voice more powerful than he intended, infused with a lifetime of labor and sacrifice. The leader laughed again, now devoid of some of its bravado. "We're just here to have a little fun." Jake's jaw clenched as he held his shovel tight, every fiber of his being screaming to protect his land. "If you want a party, do it somewhere else." The gang fell quiet, bewildered by his defiance. They had spent the day riding roughshod over smaller towns, terrorizing shop owners and leaving a trail of chaos. They didn't expect resistance, especially not from a lone farmer cloaked in the dust of his own land. "Dude, why don't we just roll out? This is a waste of time," one of the younger bikers shrugged, looking uncertain. The leader snapped back, momentarily angling his anger toward his crew instead. He turned back to Jake, who stood resolute. Jake felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they weren't as invincible as they thought. "You don't need to do this," Jake implored, stepping forward, shovel still at the ready. "You could leave peacefully, turn back, and maybe find some joy without harming anyone else." The leader scoffed, but Jake saw the uncertainty creeping back into his eyes. The laughter of his crew stuttered, rattling against the tension surrounding them. That moment of hesitation was a glimmer of doubt that Jake seized upon like a lifebuoy in a stormy sea. "You came here to bully someone weaker than you. You could head back, change your narrative, and be men who do the right thing." The air shifted again, something electric crackling between them. For the first time, Jake could see doubt in the eyes of the other bikers, a flicker of uncertainty in the face of his fiery determination. Deep down, they knew this wasn't just about bikes or bravado. This was about a man standing firm against chaos. Suddenly, the barn doors creaked open wider, and there stood Amy, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and anger. She shouted, raising a makeshift weapon, a heavy wrench she had scavenged from the barn. The crew's demeanor shifted again, this time in disbelief. How could a girl step up like that, challenging their bravado? Unfazed by the bewildered laughter, Jake stepped closer to Amy, his heart swelling with pride. "Honey, you shouldn't be out here," he murmured, but she shook her head. "No, Dad, you're not alone in this." The strength in her voice was fierce. It resonated with something ancient, the need to protect and safeguard what mattered most. Jake said, a hint of a smile breaking through the tension. "You don't just face one farmer." Amy's bravery stoked the fire within Jake. The bikers exchanged nervous glances, sensing the dangerously united front they were now facing. The gang had come seeking chaos, a thrill of power, but what they found was a family unwilling to back down. Okay, the leader said, stepping back, voice laced with sudden unease. It was all just fun and games, right? But Jake's keen gaze caught the tremor in his voice. They were faltering. Jake echoed with intensity, eyes narrowing. This isn't a game. Then he drew strength from the legacy of those that came before him. The farmers, the builders, the dreamers who had gone to war against the elements. He felt their spirits behind him, solid, unwavering. Shouted the leader, but his voice lost its edge. He gestured for his crew to rev their engines, and suddenly the roar of motorcycles filled the air once again, but this time it echoed with an entirely different attitude. One by one, the bikers mounted their rides, uncertainty spilling over like oil on water. One biker mumbled as he observed the gang's leader, who was now visibly shaken. Joe allowed himself a moment, the weight of their uncertainty fueling his confidence. You know you didn't accomplish anything here today. Jake turned his attention back to Amy. You did good, kiddo, he said, pride swelling in his heart. As the engines roared loudly, the gang, defeated and deflated, sped off into the distance, disappearing into the gathering twilight. The dust settled slowly, leaving behind a calm where chaos had thrived moments before. Jake dropped his shovel, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He wrapped an arm around Amy and held her tightly, a mix of relief and overwhelming gratitude spilling over. We did it, Dad, she said softly, bewilderment giving way to joy. Yes, we did, he breathed, overwhelmed by the heart-pounding surge of victory. The weight of their fear and courage balanced like the finest wine aged for decades. The stars began to blanket the sky, twinkling like diamonds above. The calm that set in felt surreal, a stark contrast to the chaos they had faced moments ago. The ranch, resilient as ever, stood tall against the night, a silent witness to their bravery. In that moment of stillness, as they surveyed their property, a bond formed, a new one far stronger than leather, metal, or roaring engines could ever break. Jake realized something profound. This land wasn't just about crops and farming. It was about family, heritage, and standing together against the tide of chaos. He looked to the stars and whispered a silent promise to protect this legacy fiercely, together always. The sun hung in a cloudless sky, golden rays spilling over the fields of Greencrest Ranch, wrapping everything in warmth. Now an eerie stillness blanketed the land. Farmer Tom Jenkins wiped the sweat from his brow as he paused near the barn door to observe the horizon. Something felt off. An ominous tension prickled at the back of his neck. He listened closer. The distinctive roar of engines gradually infiltrated the tranquility, growing more robust, more chaotic. It wasn't the soothing sound of local farmers coming home for dinner. No, this was something different, something primal, something that sent a jolt of dread through his veins. Tom's heart raced. With every passing second, the rumbling grew louder, resonating through the ground like a storm approaching. Scanning the horizon, he could make out the silhouettes of motorcycles racing toward him, kicked up dust creating an ominous cloud behind them. A sinister grin spread across his face, sharp as a razor. Not today, Tom whispered under his breath. He turned away from the barn, adrenaline coursing through him, his determined spirit igniting. For nearly 30 years, Tom had poured his life into this land, raising crops and livestock, fending off every challenge thrown his way. This wasn't just dirt and grass. It was his blood, his sweat, and his legacy. He wouldn't let a band of intruders tear that down, not without a fight. The crew of bikers stormed onto his property, a menacing sight clad in leather and metal. They were loud and brash, festooned with tattoos and the kind of swagger that only came from a dangerous sense of freedom. Tom could see their leader up front, a towering figure with a wild beard, eyes glinting with mischief. They lined up their motorcycles, engines rumbling like distant thunderclouds, clearly ready for chaos. The leader hollered, a grin splitting his face, revealing crooked teeth. "What's a guy like you doing on a gorgeous day like this?" Tom stepped forward, steady and unyielding. "Get off my land." Laughter erupted from the gang, a cacophony of mockery that sliced into the air. "Come on, old man." Another biker chimed in, revving his engine. "We just want a little fun." Tom clenched his fists, feeling the urge to protect everything he had built flooding him. He could never be anyone's idea of a pushover. You think you can ride in here and do whatever you please. This is my home. Another round of laughter spilled forth, the crew leaning closer, emboldened by the fear they sensed in the air. The leader sneered, taking a step closer, his breath hot with menace. You think you can stand up to us? In that moment, Tom felt a familiar fire ignite in his chest. Hardship had sculpted him over the years. He had faced storms and droughts, the death of loved ones, and the many trials of farming life, but he had refused to surrender. You think I back down easily? A flicker of uncertainty crossed the leader's face. Beneath the raucous laughter, glimmers of doubt danced in the eyes of his crew. Maybe, just maybe, they had bitten off more than they could chew, but the moment passed quickly, frustration overriding their collective hesitation. The leader shouted, his bravado returning. You'll regret this. With that, the bikers advanced, engines revving menacingly. But rather than backing away, Tom held his ground, his heart sinking with the rhythm of the impending chaos. Suddenly, the air shifted. Tom's daughter, Sarah, emerged from the house, her wide eyes filled with alarm. Dad, Tom shouted, checking behind him. But Sarah stood firm, her fists clenched, ready to stand with him to defend their heritage. You don't have to do this, she pleaded with the gang, her voice rising above the roar of the engines. The gang hesitated, the laughter faltering as surprise etched across their faces. They hadn't expected a girl to challenge them, especially not like this. What's this? The leader sneered, but his bravado was brittle. One of the bikers blurted, uncertain. But Sarah stepped forward, defiance lighting her spirit like a beacon. This is my home. We've worked hard for everything here. Seeing her heart and courage surge through her words, Tom felt a swell of pride. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just about him. This was a battle for their family legacy. It pulsed through their hands, through every piece of land they tilled and every animal they raised. You see, it's not just me you'll mess with. The bikers exchanged apprehensive glances, their bravado cracking more than ever. There was an energy building among them. They were beginning to question their own intentions. The leader cleared his throat, an edge of uncertainty creeping back into his demeanor. Ah, come on. We're just trying to have a little fun here, Tom repeated, the steel in his tone sharpening. You call this fun? Harassing a family and tearing apart something you don't understand. The leader bellowed defiantly, but Tom could hear the wobble in his voice. The gang was crumbling beneath the pressure of their own making, and it was exhilarating. I think you should care, Sarah interjected strongly. You think we'll let you intimidate us? Tom glanced at his daughter, pride swelling within him. In her words, he felt the essence of the land, the fearlessness of the soil beneath their feet, the unyielding love for home. When the leader stepped closer again, the look was different now. It wasn't just arrogance, it was desperation. You don't want to mess with us, he warned, but his bravado lacked its usual punch. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the grounds, amplifying the tension simmering between them. You don't scare me, Tom declared, feeling the unity in their stance. We've faced worse than you, droughts, storms, you name it. This land is our life. You think your strength will win out. And then, like sparks igniting dry kindling, something shifted. A flicker of hope danced in Tom's heart. Would they really risk it all? The gang's uncertainty grew palpable, and he seized the moment. Take a look around. This is our life. Want to mess with it? An uneasy murmur ran through the bikers, their confidence wavering against the palpable unity surrounding Tom and Sarah. They hadn't counted on the strength of a family willing to defend their honor. The crew appeared to waver again, exchanging doubtful glances. They hadn't come prepared for a core strength that resonated beyond noise and chaos. Just walk away, Tom urged further. There's nothing here for you but heartache. You're not the only ones who know how to fight. Fight? You think you scare us? We're not just going to retreat, the leader insisted, but his bravado slipped with each passing word. And then came a voice from behind them, a neighbor, Mark, emerging from his own porch, a loyal supporter of the community, standing shoulder to shoulder with Tom. What's it gonna be, boys? You really want to take on the whole town? The leader's sneer faltered. He cried, but the strength of unity had encircled him, the fervor of community pressing in from all sides. One by one, more neighbors joined, men and women with faces determined, hearts unwavering. Called out another. The tide had turned with the approach of solidarity, and Tom could feel the swell of strength from the community embracing him. The bikers were now a wall of tension, facing a gathering storm of people unwilling to back down. Tom thundered, his voice echoing across the land. And in that moment, the leader turned cowardly. The laughter turned to whispers, and uncertainty filled the air. Staring into the fierce unity on the farmer's side, he realized they had underestimated their opponent. Somewhere deep within, they had become the very thing they had come to claim. "Let's get out of here," the leader muttered, mouth grim, voice laced with disbelief as he stepped back slowly. One by one, the bikers retreated, their machines no longer roaring with power but more like disgraced beasts, shamed by the bond that held Tom and his community together. As the clouds of dust settled, the sun dipped lower, glowing gently upon the gathered individuals, all standing together resolutely. Tom turned to face the crowd, heart pounding in triumph. "I can't thank you all enough," he said, voice filled with emotion, tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. "I would have fought for this land alone, but with all of you here." Cheers erupted from the crowd, ringing through the fading light. At that moment, beneath the dust of the ground and the glory of the fading sun, something powerful unfolded, a community united, a family strengthened. Tom pulled Sarah close, and for the first time she smiled, a mix of relief and pride. He declared, and the words hung in the air like a promise, a vow to defend their legacy, their home, against all challenges that dared approach. In that quiet evening, as stars sprinkled the sky like diamonds, it became clear. The real battle was never over material possessions. It was about the heart of a community, the spirit of family, and the relentless will to stand against the storm together. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the sprawling fields of Hilltop Ranch. The crops danced gently in the evening breeze, and farmer Bill Carter took a moment to admire the fruits of his labor. He wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned against an old oak tree, appreciating the serenity of a day well spent. But then a low rumble broke the peaceful silence, something unexpected. Bill squinted into the distance, frowning as the sound grew louder, growing from a mere whisper to a thunderous roar. He could see them now, dark silhouettes against the setting sun, racing toward him on a fleet of motorcycles. A flurry of emotions coursed through him. "Not today," Bill muttered, dread blending with determination. His thoughts raced. This wasn't the first time the locals had faced a threat. Over the years, he had heard tales of a wild crew who roamed the quiet countryside, leaving trails of chaos and fear behind them. These were not ordinary bikers. They were known for their reckless behavior, notorious for intimidation and disrespecting anyone who got in their way. As the dust kicked up on the gravel path leading to his ranch, Bill's heart pounded heavily in his chest. Caution mixed with resolve. He couldn't let them overrun his home, not when he had poured so much into it. The engines roared louder, and soon the bikers skidded to a halt before him. A gang of 8 leather-clad figures dismounted, their faces adorned with wild tattoos and grins that spoke of mischief. The leader, a burly man with a thick beard and piercing eyes, sauntered forward with an air of arrogance. Well, what do we have here? Just a lonely farmer." Bill squared his shoulders, gripping the fence post tightly. "You need to leave." Laughter erupted from the crew, a cacophony of mockery that pierced the calm of the evening. "Private property," the leader sneered, leaning in closer. "We're just here to have a good time, old man." The heat of anger ignited in Bill, anger for himself, for his land, for the decades of hard work that had led him to this moment. "This isn't just dirt to me. This ranch is my life. You won't come in here and make trouble." He watched the bravado in their eyes flicker just for a second. They didn't expect resistance. They had come to rattle and frighten, but he was standing tall, resolute. The leader straightened, trying to reclaim authority. "No," Bill replied, voice steady. The tension in the air thickened, heavy and electric. Bill could feel the weight of the moment, a battle of wills. The crew exchanged nervous glances, realizing the farmer wouldn't be intimidated easily. They hadn't expected him to stand his ground. "Ha!" The leader barked, though a hint of doubt crept into his voice. "Maybe you should take a long look in the mirror," Bill said, stepping closer. "You think terrorizing farmers is fun. Funny how a pack of wolves hides behind their numbers." The crew went quiet. For the first time, they seemed unsure of their numbers and strength. The The leader tried to mask it, but Bill was close enough to see the flicker of concern in his eyes. "Try me," Bill shot back, feeling the adrenaline surging with each word. He had faced storms, droughts, and setbacks before. He wouldn't let fear dictate his life now. The leader laughed, but it was hollow, devoid of confidence. "What are you going to do?" With that, Tom picked up a rusty shovel leaning against the barn. "Maybe I will." The gang shifted, their laughter nervous now. The realization set in they weren't dealing with just an old man. They were up against a force that lived and breathed this land, a passion rooted deep in generations of tradition. Suddenly, one of the younger bikers stepped forward, wariness replacing bravado. "Look, man, let's not fight." "Then walk away," Bill replied, not breaking eye contact with the leader. "Leave peacefully." But the leader shook his head defiantly. "You think we'll just turn around? You're going to regret this, trust me." In that moment, Bill saw a glimmer of doubt flicker across the gang's faces, a hesitance mingling not just with fear but with the subtle acknowledgement of their intimidation. "If it's fun you want, how about this? You turn around and leave peacefully while you still can." An uncomfortable silence enveloped them, the tension thick enough to slice through. Bill felt the air shift as he realized he wasn't standing alone. Behind him, the loft door creaked and out stepped his son, Jake, a young man fueled by youthful audacity. Jake called out, spotting the bikers. Bill shouted, but it was too late. Jake stood beside his father, fists clenched, ready to defend their home. The leader taunted, amusement mingled with frustration. "Looks like the farmer has a little kid ready to back him up." "Charming," Jake said, determination compelling him forward. "You think you can roll into our home and disrespect us like this?" Laughter erupted again, but this time there was a wavering quality to it. Bill could feel the unity developing between him and his son. Together, they were a formidable force, a powerful force filled with love and loyalty. "Listen, kid," the leader said, "you really think standing next to your old man is going to protect you?" "Strength doesn't come from numbers," Bill countered. "It comes from the heart, and we've got that in spades." The biker's bravado faltered further as the realization set in. Bill and Jake were standing resolute, embodying the unwavering spirit of their family legacy. Bill saw the flicker of uncertainty deepen in the leader's eyes as they processed the weight of their threats. Jake continued, his voice strong and clear. "Think about it." The hesitation lingered in the air, creating tension that felt as thick as smoke. The gang's laughter had turned brittle, starting to crack like old plaster. They came expecting a target too easy, but now they were being challenged, pushed back by the inertia of family loyalty and tradition. "You're making a mistake," the leader muttered, trying to regain control, but the bite had left his bark. "Make your choice," Bill said, his voice steady. "Walk away now without causing harm. You don't need to be part of something that ends badly." The leader's confidence evaporated as he looked at the unwavering resolve of the farmer and his son. A flicker of vulnerability flashed across his face, revealing an uncomfortable truth. The bikers had come expecting a fight, but instead, they faced conviction from those who cared deeply about what they were fighting for. "Fine, we'll go," he finally said, the weight of resignation resting heavily in his voice. Bill took a breath, relief washing over him in waves, but he stayed watchful. He could sense the tension loosening, the heaviness in the air transforming. With a collective air of defeat, the bikers mounted their bikes, leaving behind a cloud of dust as their engines roared to life. One by one, they peeled away, retreating into the distance, leaving Bill and Jake standing together, triumphant. Bill turned to his son, heart swelling with pride as he surveyed the horizon. "You stood your ground, Jake." "Thanks, Dad," Jake replied, still caught in the moment of adrenaline. "I realized we can't let them walk all over us." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky transformed into a breathtaking display of colors, warm pinks and deep purples swirling together like a painting. The immediate threat had passed, but the heart of Hilltop Ranch remained unscathed, resilient against the odds. "We did it together," Bill said, his voice filled with emotion. The bond they shared extended beyond blood. It was enshrined in shared moments of bravery, a fight worth battling. Together, they stood as beacons of hope as the world around them continued to spin, their home cherished and protected, a testament to the love and legacy woven into the very fabric of their being. And in the heart of Hilltop Ranch, they had faced the storm, reaffirming the undeniable truth. Where there is unity, there is strength. And where there is strength, there is a place that stands proud, unwavering, no matter the challenge that may arise. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the wide-open fields of Clover Hill Ranch in shades of gold. It was the end of a sweltering August day, and Farmer Ben Hawthorne leaned against the wooden fence, wiping sweat from his brow. Just another ordinary evening, or so he thought, until he heard a distant rumble echoing across the valley, a sound that grew louder with each passing moment. He straightened, squinting into the horizon. His pulse quickened as feelings of unease crept in and the pit in his stomach deepened. He murmured to himself. In seconds, the rumble turned into a roar, and then he spotted them, a gang of motorcycles speeding down the dusty road leading to his ranch. There were at least a dozen of them, each like a beast of chrome and fury. The riders were clad in leather jackets, tattoos marking their skin like war paint. Ben had heard tales of this wild crew known for wreaking havoc wherever they rode. Ben's mind raced. The reputation of the gang filled him with dread. They were known for their reckless abandon, causing mayhem and fear in their wake. He gripped the fence post tighter, feeling its rough texture grounding him in the moment. "Not today," he whispered fiercely. He turned his attention to the barn, the worn wood and old machinery standing strong against time. This was more than just a piece of land. It was his legacy, his family's lifeblood. He wouldn't let them tear it apart. He took a deep breath, summoned his courage, and stepped forward, preparing to defend what was his. As the bikers roared up his driveway, the dust swirling around them like a storm, Ben stood tall. He could see the leader, a rough-looking man with a wild beard and menacing grin, dismounting from his bike like a lion claiming its territory. Laughter rang out from the group, a boisterous sound that filled the evening air, mingling with the distant call of birds and the rustle of the wind. "Hey there, farmer," the leader called out, swaggering forward, confidence dripping from his every word. Ben clenched his jaw, stepping closer. "You need to leave. This is private property," he said, his voice firm. The gang erupted in laughter, their bravado thick as the dust cloud they'd kicked up. "Private property," the leader said, sneering. "Just want to have a little fun, old man." Ben echoed, his heart pounding in his chest. "You call this chaos fun? You're trespassing and threatening my home." The leader stepped closer, a predatory glint in his eyes. "And what are you going to do about it?" he taunted, glancing at the rusty tool that Ben had grabbed from the barn. In that moment, something snapped within Ben. He held the shovel tightly, feeling its weight in his hands, and found strength in the memories of hard work and perseverance. "Believe me, you won't want to find out. I've fought for this land and what it stands for." The laughter dwindled, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Ben could sense the uncertain glances exchanged among the bikers, and he pressed on, feeling the fire of defiance burn brighter within him. "You think you're tough? I've weathered storms, I've endured droughts, I've lost, and I've fought through it all." The leader seemed to falter, his bravado wavering as he surveyed the steadfast farmer before him. He said, trying to regain his confidence but failing to mask the doubt creeping into his voice. "Try me," Ben shot back, clenched fists at his sides. The bikers shifted uncomfortably, the initial thrill of intimidation slipping through their fingers. They had underestimated him, thinking he was just an old farmer. The tension hung thick in the air, heavy with unsaid words, and for a split second Ben saw a flicker of fear in the leader's eyes, a realization that this time they might have picked a fight with the wrong man. "Look, man," one of the younger bikers stepped in, stepping away from the group. "We're just having a little fun, right? No harm meant." The leader shot him a glare, irritation bubbling to the surface. "Shut up," he snapped. "Or maybe we just stop wasting our time here," the younger biker shot back, glancing toward the back of the group. The uncertainty was palpable. They hadn't come expecting a challenge, and now they faced an unwavering resolve that made them rethink their entire plan. Ben felt the energy shift. This was no longer just a standoff. This was a stand of conviction, his heart thundering in rhythm with the resolve of those who had fought for what mattered. "You see," he said calmly, "you don't just face me. You face everything that I've built and everything I've lost. I won't back down. So the choice is yours. You leave and I won't forget your faces." The The tension practically crackled in the air as he watched the gang weigh their options. Some were visibly shaken, casting quick glances among each other, nerves fraying. The leader twitched, glancing back toward his crew, but the cracks were starting to show. "Come on, let's get out of here," one of them piped up, uncertain. The leader growled, trying to assert himself again. But his voice lacked conviction, and the gang was quickly losing their enthusiasm. Suddenly, an unexpected sound pierced the tension, the heavy thud of footsteps. Ben turned to see his daughter, Claire, stepping out of the farmhouse, eyes wide with fear but fiercely defiant. She shouted, glancing between the bikers and her father. Ben called, but there was no backing down. She wouldn't let him face this alone. Claire yelled, stepping beside her father, fists clenched. The bikers exchanged incredulous looks. "This is adorable," the leader sneered, but the amusement in his voice slipped away as he recognized the strength in her stance, the fierce protectiveness shining in her eyes. "Adorable," Claire shot back, unwavering. "You have no idea who you're messing with. This ranch means everything to us." Felt a surge of pride wash over him. Claire had inherited the same spirit, the same fire to fight for what mattered. "That's right," he added. "You think we'll just cower in fear?" The leader took a step back, unease creeping into the faces of the bikers. He said, but now his confidence had all but evaporated. Ben pressed forward, gripping his shovel tightly, holding it upright as a symbol of resistance. "You want to test us? You won't just face me, you'll face my family." "What's right?" The leader spat, but the edge was gone from his voice. "No," Ben countered, the fire in his heart igniting. "I'm a father, a husband, and a guardian of this land." The bikers shifted again, uncertainty coursing through them. "Come on, man, let's just take off," another voice suggested, a tremor edging in. Laughter had turned to desperation, and the crew felt cornered. "Looks like you all never really had the guts to begin with," Ben taunted, feeling the collective strength of family and community behind him. "You brought fear to our door, but now it's time to decide." Finally, the leader's bravado crumbled as uncertainty flashed across his features. He glanced back at his crew, and one by one, their resolve began to waver. The camaraderie they thought they had started to unravel under the weight of Ben's words. "Fine," the leader said finally, chin held high, but the resolve was faltering in his eyes. "We're leaving." Ben watched as the gang mounted their bikes, engines roaring to life but no longer with the sound of triumph. They drove away, a cloud of dust leaving behind their crumbling bravado. As the last bike disappeared down the winding road, an overwhelming sense of relief washed over Ben. He turned to Claire and pulled her into a fierce embrace, his heart swelling with pride. "You were amazing, sweetheart." "You taught me well, Dad," she replied, her voice filled with warmth. As dusk settled, enveloping the ranch in the soft embrace of evening, neighbors began to trickle over, drawn by the rumble of bikes and the call of courage. They arrived, expressions of concern melting into joy and pride. One neighbor asked, eyes wide with curiosity. Ben stepped forward, sharing the story of the confrontation, recounting their bravery and unwavering spirit. The crowd grew, enveloping him in a wave of support, and laughter echoed as they praised Claire for her boldness. In that moment, beneath the rising moon, the ranch stood proud and unyielding. It wasn't just about the land. It was about family, about standing together against anything that threatened their way of life, about the resilience that lived deep within their hearts. Ben knew that while they might have faced chaos today, they emerged from it stronger, more united. This was a testament to the spirit of Clover Hill Ranch, the unwavering resolve to protect what they loved, no matter the odds stacked against them. And as they stood together, arms entwined, laughter mingling with the chirps of crickets, they knew they could face any storm that threatened their land again. As long as they stood together, family, resilience and love at the forefront of their journey. The sun hung heavy in the sky, casting a warm, golden light over the sprawling fields of Iron Ridge Ranch. The sounds of nature filled the air, soft rustling of leaves, the distant croaking of frogs, and the rhythm of a gentle breeze. Farmer Jack Reynolds wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned back to admire his hard work. The crops were flourishing, a testament to countless hours spent tending the land. But in the midst of this idyllic scene, a low rumble began to slice through the tranquility, creeping into Jack's consciousness like a warning. He straightened, squinting into the horizon, the unease coiling tightly in his chest. Slowly, the sound grew louder, morphing from a distant roar to a thunderous clamor. As the dust began to swirl in the fading light, Jack's heart raced. He knew this sound all too well. A gang of bikers was approaching. He muttered under his breath, his mind racing back to the stories he had heard of this crew, notorious for their reckless behavior, terrorizing small towns and disrupting peaceful lives. He turned toward the barn, the weathered wood standing strong against the sun's waning rays. This place was not just land, it was his legacy, passed down through generations. He had fought hard to build a life here, to cultivate it into something meaningful. There was no way he would let a band of troublemakers tear it down. The roar of the engines grew louder until the motorcycles barreled into view, dark figures silhouetted against the evening sky. Bikers wearing leather jackets and tattoos that told stories of rebellion and freedom. They swarmed onto his property, kicking up a cloud of dust that hung in the air like a looming storm. Jack straightened up, summoning every ounce of courage he had. He could see the leader of the gang, a burly man with a beard and a glint in his eye that spoke of mischief. As the crew dismounted, laughter echoed across the ranch, a twisted invitation to chaos. "Hey there, farmer, didn't expect to find you out here," the leader shouted, swaggering towards Jack, his flanked crew grinning like wolves ready to pounce. "Get off my land," Jack said, his voice steady but his heart pounding. A chorus of laughter erupted from the group, filling the air with mockery. "Private property, what's a little fun gonna hurt?" The leader taunted, stepping closer, his breath reeking of smoke and arrogance. "I won't ask you again," Jack replied, feeling the fire rise within him. "This isn't just dirt to me. This ranch is my life." The leader's grin faltered for a brief moment, surprise cutting through the bravado. The tension in the air shifted, and Jack felt the weight of his words hanging like a challenge. The leader sneered, trying to regain control of the situation. "Whatever I have to," Jack declared, his grip tightening around the fence post. Instinct kicked in as Jack took a step forward, determination flooding his veins. He had been through storms and droughts, had faced loss and hardship. This was his home and he would defend it. "I've bled for this land, I've sacrificed everything." The laughter faded, replaced by an oppressive silence. Jack stood firm, unyielding while the gang began to reassess. He saw uncertainty creep into their expressions. Was this farmer really willing to stand against them? One of the younger bikers whispered, clearly uncomfortable, "Can't we just turn around and leave?" The leader shot him a furious glance. "Shut up," but Jack sensed the cracks forming in the leader's armor. "Listen," Jack said, lowering his voice but keeping it firm. "You can enjoy yourselves elsewhere. You don't have to do this." The leader scoffed, crossing his arms defiantly. "You think we'll just turn around?" Jack's heart raced, adrenaline coursing through him. This wasn't just about him. This was about his history, his home, and the dreams he had for the future. With every breath, he felt the weight of those who had come before him. "I'm not saying you have to back down," he said, voice steady. "But understand this, if you don't leave now, it's going to get ugly." The gang's confidence continued to waver and the leader shifted uneasily. "What are you going to do?" He motioned toward the rusty tool resting against the barn, but his voice didn't hold the same bite it did before. "That shovel has dug many a hole, and it'll dig your graves if it comes to that," Jack replied, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "You see, everyone thinks they have power, but true power comes from those who have nothing to lose." The gang stood there, their bravado ebbing away, replaced by wariness. Jack saw it in their eyes, fear of the unknown, fear of consequence. This wasn't just some ordinary farmer. He was a man with grit, determination, and a fierce will. They hadn't come prepared for that. The leader paused, trying to read Jack's resolve. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, he shouted, "Listen, we're not afraid of some old farmer and his rusty shovel." At that moment, Jack stepped forward, adrenaline surging. Is it power to scare innocent people, to ride roughshod over those who work hard? "Man, let's just get out of here," one of the younger bikers muttered, glancing around nervously. The leader growled, but he could hear the dissent growing in his ranks. The easy laughter that had defined their arrival had faded, and tension now hung thick in the air, punctuated only by the distant sounds of a breeze rustling through the fields. "You don't need to do this," Jack urged, trying to reach the more uncertain members of the gang. "Walk away. You could choose to be better than this." pride. The leader spat, anger sparking in his eyes, but Jack's voice remained steady. Pride comes from protecting what matters. Just as the leader opened his mouth to respond, Claire, Jack's teenage daughter, appeared at the barn's entrance, eyes wide with fear but resolute. "Dad," she called out, stepping forward despite her fear. Jack shouted, but she kept moving forward, determination etched on her face. "No," she exclaimed, standing beside her father. "This is our home." The bikers were visibly taken aback, never anticipating a teenager stepping up to confront them. The leader attempted to maintain his composure, chuckling nervously. "What's the kid gonna do?" Jack thundered, placing a protective hand on Claire's shoulder. "Think you can come in here and disrupt our lives?" Claire met the leader's gaze, her fiery spirit shining. "We've worked hard for this ranch." The sheer tenacity in Claire's voice shifted the dynamic once again. The gang was unraveling, their earlier bravado dissipating under the weight of unity from this father and daughter. Jack felt their resolve amplifying, that unyielding bond of family strengthening his stance. One biker exclaimed. The leader clenched his fists, frustration radiating off him. "We don't back down." "Regret," Jack responded, challenging him with intense focus. "You stand here today thinking you're invincible, but power without respect is nothing." The gang stirred uneasily again, uncertainty painting their faces, revealing cracks in their earlier bravado. "Maybe we should just leave," one of the younger bikers offered tentatively. For the first time, Jack saw doubt flicker in the leader's eyes. Finally, Ben pressed on. "You've come here to cause chaos, but you have no idea what you're challenging." A silence fell over the group, thick with unease and indecision. Jack could feel the tide turning. The resolve of those standing behind him was palpable. He saw the fearlessness in Claire's eyes, the community gathering at the edges of the ranch, drawn by the swelling storm of unity and defiance. Claire urged, her voice rising. The gang was surrounded now. It was no longer just Jack and his daughter. It was a community poised to defend what was theirs. The leader swallowed hard, glancing back at the crew, urgency creeping into his tone as he leaned closer to his gang. "What's it gonna be, boys?" Finally, the leader let out a reluctant growl, the tension in his shoulders slumping ever so slightly. "Let's get out of here," he barked, trying to mask his defeat. He shouted, mounting his bike with the others quickly following suit. As they revved their engines and roared off into the distance, the dust settled like a weight lifted from Jack's shoulders. He stood, heart racing, alongside Claire as the community quietly cheered their triumph. Claire exclaimed, her voice breaking with emotion. Jack pulled her into a hug, his heart swelling with pride for her bravery, for the resilience they had shown together. But just as they began to bask in their unexpected victory, a dark cloud rolled in from the horizon, slowly creeping across the fields. Jack noticed movement at the edge of the road. New bikes, bigger numbers, shadows of more riders surged into view, and the air crackled with tension again. Jack's heart dropped. He held Claire tightly, a mix of dread and determination flooding him once more. The storm wasn't over, and they were about to face a darker wind than before. What would happen now? Would they fight again, or would this turn into something far worse? As the first revs of the new crew's engines echoed in the distance, the curtain on what could be a far more intense confrontation began to rise. Jack's mind raced as the realization hit him. They weren't just outnumbered. They were on the brink of an even bigger struggle, and he had to be ready to stand his ground once more.